Welcome to Caregiver S.O.S. On Air, presented by the WellMed Charitable Foundation, with nationally known gerontologist Carol Zernial and award-winning veteran broadcaster Ron Aaron. This program provides health, wellness, and other information for caregivers who are vital to the health and well-being of so many people across our country. And now, here are your hosts, Ron Aaron and Carol Zernial.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the award-winning Caregiver S.O.S. On Air. I'm Ron Aaron. We're talking about a really important topic today. That's the whole question of ageism, both overt and covert, dealing with discrimination and negative feelings toward older people. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. She's got a master's degree in social gerontology, 30 years experience in the field. Carol is co-chair of the Raise Family Caregiving Advisory Council and executive director of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. And Carol, this is a neat and important topic.
Well, it is a neat and important topic. You know, ageism, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it impacts all of us, particularly in American society. And the bad news is that it's creeping down, so that age discrimination, if you think about all the technology, people in their 40s are starting to feel it as they apply for jobs. You know, it's in healthcare, it's everywhere. And we as a country need to get over it because we all want to live long, healthy lives.
Well, it's fortunate to have in-house a real expert on ageism, Tina Smith, Director of Caregiving Programs at the WellMed Charitable Foundation. She's a dedicated leader in social gerontology and a senior support staff. She's based here in San Antonio and oversees operations of the Foundation's Caregiver S.O.S. programs and a whole lot more. Tina, thank you for coming on with us.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm kind of wearing my other hat today. And this is a message that I think is important. Like you said, it's not talked about enough, but it impacts just so many people. So I appreciate the opportunity to come chat about this.
Well, it's interesting. When you type into Google or any of the other search engines, what is ageism? A million words pop up. Among them, stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination based on age, deeply rooted issue with tangible, destructive consequences for older adults. Tina, what is ageism? What is it?
Well, it is. It's the stereotypes that we have, the prejudice that we have against or towards people because of their age. And really, we talk more about it as it relates to older adults, but it can also be towards anybody of any age as well. But it's ingrained at a very early age. We start getting these ideas, even if you talk about the fairy tales that we grew up with, all the witches and the ogres and all the bad people in some of those cartoons we watched were typically older in nature. We get the advertisements about fighting the aging process, when we're, as teenagers, and the magazines that we read and the commercials that we see on TV and the greeting card aisle. If you walk past the greeting card aisle in a while, that, at the age of 40, the black balloons start coming out and the over-the-hill comments start coming out. So it's just something that is everywhere. And unfortunately, I don't think it's something most people think about. We talk about the other isms, the racism and sexism, but we just don't talk about the discrimination and the stereotypes that we have against the aging process.
And for caregivers, ageism can cut both ways. It can skew their view of their care recipient and public's view of them.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It really does impact family caregivers. If we have the view of aging, it's been depicted almost like an arch. It's like an arch. We rise to our peak in our midlife, and then it's all downhill from there. And so if we have those beliefs, what we believe is what we think, and it drives how we act and behave. And so if we think somebody in their 80s is decrepit, they're not capable of managing things that they used to be, then that's how we're going to treat them, whether we mean to or not. And so, and same thing, just caregivers in general, we all, they also face, just the general ageism that society faces.
And Tina, I love what you're saying, and the examples that always come to my mind is that there are women in the Andes Mountains who, with pots on their heads, who are, carrying water or coffee beans, and they're going up and down the hills at the age of 80 because nobody told them they couldn't. If you think about people in Japan sitting on the floor, if you've been to a Japanese restaurant where they have floor seating, you know how difficult it is for us as Americans to get up and down. It's not a problem for them because it's part of their culture. And what we have allowed in the United States is for age to define us as less than. And we limit our own abilities without even, we built it into our way of life, and we don't have to be limited like that.
No, I love that. I mean, that's 100% right. I think again, because we buy into these things, I'm too old to do this, or, I'm retired. I'm supposed to take it easy now, or whatever those things that we have in our head. We buy into them, and that does limit us greatly.
Now, hold that thought. I want to come right back to you. If you just joined us, you're listening to the award-winning Caregiver S.O.S. on air. I'm Ron Aaron with Carol Zernial, our co-host, and we're talking with Tina Smith about ageism. Our podcast available wherever you get your podcast, and we're so pleased you're with us. One of the ways in which you see ageism impacting relationships is a spouse who may say to kids, hey, your mom doesn't hear well. She's got hearing aids. Speak up. She may not hear anything you say. Don't worry about it. Just talk to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just, the aging process in general, I think it's treated as a disease or a problem to be solved. And really, it's another process of life. It's another stage of life. Now, when we talk about reframing aging, we're talking about how we can talk about aging differently. We're not talking about putting rose-colored glasses on or saying that everything is going to be easy. Aging does bring some declines. Our bodies change as we age. But assuming that we're all, that just because somebody may not hear as well, that they can't hear at all is a false belief. Assuming that because somebody is 70, that they're not going to be able to jog or run or exercise any longer. And so we need to, again, shift our conversations, shift the way that we think about the aging process in order to, and change the conversations we're having with ourselves as well as others to change, to make a change and to look at aging more favorably.
How do you make that happen?
We talk about reframing, and we all reframe or frame how we present information on a regular basis, whether we realize it or not. It's the tone we use when we're trying to convey information. It's, the words we use, the values that we have. It's the stories we tell, and we want people to see things our way. And so again, it comes back to, the words that we use, whether it is being mindful of what you think, so, you're not thinking, well, I'm too old to do this, or, catching yourself when you say she looks great for her age, whatever that might be. It's just the first step would be kind of in yourself, some self-reflection and catching yourself and being aware of when you might be thinking some of these thoughts.
So Tina, one of the fun things, if people want to understand how ageism is impacting everyone, take a picture out of your grandmother, right? And look at her at your age, and then look at yourself or look at other people. We don't dress old per se the same way. So we have changed the way that we see ourselves. We now don't dress like little old ladies the minute we turn 50. and you can see that if you look at old photographs. So I think that's a great way for people to visually understand that we don't have to be, think about old people the same way.
No, absolutely. I mean, you just think about the last 100 years, we have added as a society like over 30 years to our life expectancy. And so, I mean, that's a whole lot of life left to live. And so, if we look at our grandparents or our great grandparents, I mean, they live very different lives and very different expectations. And so, the idea of turning 60 is life changing for some people. They worry about, they worry about those landmark birthdays, but that could be stopping them. Like you talked about, it could stop them from exploring more. It could stop them from exercising. If we have the belief that, oh, I'm too old to be doing that, then we won't do it. Whereas if we have the idea, okay, I'm going to try, maybe practice will get me there, or maybe I need to do it a little bit differently than I would have in my 40s, but I can still do this. So it's not letting anyone stop you, whether it's, like I said, we have an internal voice that often stops us from doing things because we think we're too old to do something, or our beliefs about aging are on the negative side. And so, again, one of the first things we need to do is just change our internal voice. We need to change that conversation in our head and become aware of when we are saying some of these things. We need to look around and see other people around us. What they're doing, the people that are still working, the older adults that are still working or that are out there exercising. I knew a man in his 80s who was running marathons. He may not have been winning them, but he was finishing them. And so, it's, again, you might have to tweak your expectations a little bit. Don't let perfect become the enemy of good enough. And be surprised what you can accomplish. And when you start doing that, the conversation around you about, what is old, will hopefully start to change as well.
Now we're going to come right back to you. And I'm curious, in healthcare, often there's a perception on the part of some providers that, well, you're just getting old, nothing we can do. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. Tina Smith is here talking about ageism and ways in which it affects us as caregivers and care recipients as well. This is Caregiver S.O.S. on air.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Caregiver S.O.S. on air. We're delighted to have you with us. We come to you every week with a discussion of an issue, a problem, some accomplishments involved in caregiving with more than 60 million caregivers across this country, but most thinking they are the Lone Rangers. We try to bring you the latest information and help that can make that job easier and more manageable. Caregiver S.O.S. on air takes a look at trends across this country. We provide tips on how to be a better caregiver and, most importantly, where you can go for help. On Caregiver S.O.S. on air, we try to give you what you need to make that caregiving manageable and to provide you with the help that can make your life easier. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial and I are delighted to co-host this program, and we're thrilled you've joined us on the award-winning Caregiver S.O.S. on air podcast, available everywhere, brought to you by WellMed Charitable Foundation.
Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again.
Well, thank you so much for sticking with us right here on the award-winning Caregiver S.O.S. on air. Our podcast available wherever you get your podcast, and we're also on the radio in several cities in Texas and Florida as well. When we talk, Tina Smith, as we're talking about ageism and perceptions of aging, there's something called therapeutic nihilism, where providers may see someone as, well, you know what? You're just getting old. Live with it. Nothing we can do. Is that not a stereotype?
It is, unfortunately, it's just, you hear that, you're getting older, what do you expect, but really it's, if you go to the doctor for a bad knee, if your other knee is fine, then, how do you correlate? You correlate that. And so, again, it comes back to, you're going to be faced with comments like this, beliefs like this, and being aware of when they come up, and being a champion, being an advocate for yourself. If somebody, challenging these beliefs, if you're being told, well, you're getting older, what do you expect? Well, I expect to feel, that I can get around, or I expect to be able to be getting around on my peak performance, or whatever that might look like. And so, you've got to be able to speak up for yourself in those situations, and you go in, understanding, yourself better than anyone, understand what you're feeling, and you've got to speak up about that and challenge some of those thoughts. What do you mean by that? Uh, Tell me more about why you think that
Makes you very
that's the
popular
reason.
when you do that. I had
Okay.
knee surgery a couple of years ago. You were talking about knees, and I had torn my meniscus. And I remember that the surgeon told me that normally he wouldn't do surgery on someone as old as me, because I was already in my 60s. But he says, I can tell you're just going to keep on dancing and keep on running and doing what you're doing. And so we're going to go ahead and do the surgery. The day of the surgery, I was by far decades older than anyone else in there. They're all sports injuries in their 20s. And I thought, I don't know why, because I'm, back at Zumba, back running, and it
Hmm.
worked well. So there you go. Sometimes you do have to speak up.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Carol,
we'll talk about speaking up. Talk about the Frameworks Institute, where you've been working with them to
Hmm.
help us reframe our language and to think differently about the words we use. We're our own worst enemies. Sometimes we, in the professional
Yes.
space, we leading caregivers, we actually make everything sound like a terrible, like if we feed into that, the sky is falling
Hmm.
kind of feeling because everybody's getting old.
Right, right. And I think you're right. We're guilty of talking about caregiver burden, and we're talking about, getting older, and some of that. But really, this is I'm part of a local initiative that is really part of a national initiative on reframing aging. There's actually a national center to reframe aging. With the Gerontological Society of America. And there are a group of organizations, national organization leaders, that have partnered with the Frameworks Institute. And so to change the narrative about aging, to change the story for people, and to teach them about words to use. And so it's not, they're not doing it from a place of just this is what you need to do. They've done research. The Framework Institute is a nonprofit organization, that they're thought leaders, and they've done a lot of research on the impact of the words that we use. For example, they've looked at the word senior citizens versus older adults, and then there's a whole range in there. And oftentimes, when you hear the word, senior citizens, it's a lot more you think more negative connotations to seniors versus older adults. And so the Frameworks Institute has talked about implicit bias. It's just automatic, that because again, we've been surrounded by these images and by these thoughts, and some of it's blatant, and some of it's subtle, things that we just don't even think of being a problem. But the Frameworks Institute and the National Center to Reframe Aging, again, has taken all of this research and these ideas, and informed a formal process to educate people on, the words that they choose, recognizing that ageism does exist, even within our own beliefs, as well as within the groups that we serve, in institutions, in the workplace. That's another area where there's a lot of ageism. Somebody looking for a job after the age of 50 has a lot harder time in doing that, or companies start to phase people out, and as they get older. And so the National Center for Reframing Aging has done a good job in creating this framework, and is in several different parts of the country where we're trying to get the word out to our local communities about the dangers of ageism and about, what people can do to change that conversation, change the story around the aging process.
How do you get the older adult to see themselves differently?
Again, it's tough. It's baked into who we are, but it's having that conversation, starting that conversation. I've gone to different groups of older adults, and I've shared a presentation on the dangers of ageism. Again, it's just not something many people think about as being a problem, because it's just something generationally that we've grown up with. But talking about using different words, don't use senior moment, say I forgot, or don't say she looks great for her age. Instead say she just looks great, and because we wouldn't dream of saying she looks great because of her race, or she looks great because of her gender. So why do we say okay with the age? So again, it's that having that conversation, showing, highlighting positive examples, of older adults that are out, whether it's, they could be doing big things like jumping out of an airplane, or they could be doing everyday things like the volunteerism or the working that they're still doing. It's spending time with people of different generations, for everybody. There's a great initiative that they're doing here in San Antonio called Generations Over Dinner, where they bring people they seat people at tables for dinner. There has to be at least 3 different generations at that table, and then they have a facilitator that will guide that conversation, so people can hear what each other thinks. And I think that is a great way to really open your eyes. If you go in with open ears and open eyes to really hear what other generations are thinking, I think everyone would be surprised at where everyone is standing on different topics.
Tina, I happen to be 84, and I get a lot of people who look at me and say, "Wow, you look great for 84." And I'm not sure what I should say. What do you think I should look like?
I think that it's a challenge. Yeah, definitely challenge.
Just
that
say,
statement.
just look great all over.
Yeah.
Sorry about being muted. One thing that you said at the first was that ageism cross-cuts everybody. And what we hear in the across generations is that younger people don't feel heard. In our current economy, right? It's really hard for a recent college graduate to get a job. It's really hard to pay your basic bills. There are a lot of challenges, and young people right now, many of them are suffering more or as bad as some older persons on a fixed income. So, recognizing that this is life, and that we lift each other up. But listening across generations helps prevent that ageism later in life.
Absolutely. And you being open to hearing what other people have to say, and listening to different generations, and not dismissing them because they're of a certain age. I mean, that's ageism in and of itself. So again, being aware of what you're saying, having conversations like this, with the people around you, pointing out, the birthday cards or the ads, or, the ads we see on TV. The older adults are either off on a cruise somewhere, or they're on medication and in bed and can barely get around. But really, truly, there are a whole lot more people that are in between those two spectrums. There's just a lot of everyday people out there doing everyday things, and that doesn't need to stop just because you reach a certain age.
Now, Tina, we're about out of time. What would you say to the caregiver where they can get research on ageism?
Like I said, there's the National Center to Reframe Aging that you can Google that. I apologize, I don't have their website address, but they talk about that. Certainly here at the foundation, we can share information about that, but it's around you, just being aware of the people around you, the conversations around you, and just again, how we view the aging process, whatever, how we view that is going to dictate, how we behave.
Perfect.
And if you want to behave differently, then starting that self-awareness is really the first step.
That's the WellMed Charitable Foundation. Tina Smith, thank you. For Carol Zernial, I'm Ron Aaron. We'll talk with you soon right here on the award-winning Caregiver S.O.S. On Air.
The executive producer for Caregiver S.O.S. On Air is Daniel Calderon. The producer is Sharice Pendleton. And the associate producer is Catherine Oglesby. We'll see you next week on Caregiver S.O.S. On Air.
You've been listening to Caregiver S.O.S. On Air, an exclusive presentation of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. We welcome emails with suggestions and comments on this program at radio@wellmed.net. Join co-hosts Carol Zernial and Ron Aaron next week for more on caregiving, improving the health and well-being of caregivers and their care recipients everywhere. For more on caregiving and podcasts of our programs, visit caregiversos.org.